Welcome to episode 2 of Build Smart with K Squared. I am Rusty Krouse. I am one of the owners of K Squared Construction.
And I am Brenna Krouse, licensed designer and co-owner.
The show is designed to help people in all aspects of construction, planning, hiring the right people for the project. In nearly 20 years of business, we've learned that there is a better way to build, and that's why we're doing this. This is meant to be educational, informative. This is not something that is necessarily a promotion of our business. It is meant to help people really anywhere. This process works wherever. It's not unique to Granite Bay, California. It's not unique to California at all. This episode is actually called The Real Cost of Free Estimates. So, if you see what we did there. Last episode, you actually had a conversation we had a conversation about there was a contractor who came to our house. You kind of went undercover, and how did that? Give us kind of the punchline and how that process ended.
Yeah, it ended just like that, really. I invited two people over, and one found a way to shock me with his two measurements, and then his price went down immediately once I was shocked. And the other one was fairly thorough, but I never heard from either one of them again.
So that was the end. And I think this is a pretty typical result, right? We hear this a lot that we had, 4 or 5 contractors come out to the house, and maybe one or two of them, called back, or maybe 3 of them actually showed up, but only one of them gave them, a quote or what they said they were going to do, right? So I think this is just how we kind of segue into this episode too, right? And why this 3 bid rule is truly and actually broken. We touched on that again in the last episode, but didn't really talk too much about that. So I wanted to talk about why this 3 bid rule is broken and why it actually hurts homeowners.
When clients have been had it beat into their heads. I think I don't know if it's HGTV or their friends tell them at a dinner party or whatnot, but they just have this concept in their head that they need to get multiple bids so that they can compare people's pricing,
Yeah.
because if I get 3 people and compare their pricing, one is going to stand out over the other, and that'll tell me who I need to pick.
So what is it that people are missing though
Yeah.
before they make this phone call or the multiple phone calls to multiple contractors? What is it that they're actually missing, and why is it that they believe when they get the information that they get that the contractor is already starting to lead them astray?
Well, they're missing a plan. I mean, plain and simple, to put it in the simplest way for people to understand. You call a contractor, let's use a kitchen remodel, for example, especially in remodeling. Every single project is completely unique, has its own set of circumstances, is going to be entirely different from the last kitchen that we did. And so when you explain to a contractor, I want to redo my kitchen, I want to move my sink over here, and I want an island, and I want bar stools, and I want this, and I want that, that is not a plan. And
It's an idea
it's an idea.
or a dream.
Right.
Yeah.
And a plan requires a whole lot more work than just ideas that are told verbally to a contractor.
Right. Well, I think what's important for people to understand is when they call these 3 people, and again, this is hypothetical, it could be 2, it could be 10. When they call these 3 people in our hypothetical scenario, because again, we use 3 because this has been the number that I think has been burned into
Right.
everybody's head, because they feel like you'll start to see some groupings. Maybe 2 numbers will be close. Maybe you throw out the low bid, or maybe you throw out the high bid, and maybe you look for that one in the middle, and you feel like that's the one that's right. But like you said, they're missing something. They're missing a big piece of information, and that big piece of information is the plan. So at this point, in this hypothetical scenario, The problem is that the contractor is interpreting what they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're interpreting what they want, they're interpreting their finish level, they're interpreting everything,
Yep.
right? So that client could say, "Hey, we know we want, we want stain grade cabinets. But are they walnut? Are they, again, white oak? What are they? I don't know, right? And just because somebody says that they want painted cabinets, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a lower cost item either, right? What does it look like? I
Yeah.
mean, we've had people show us some kind of mirror finish, almost like an automotive type finish paint grade cabinet, right?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what I would call a paint grade cabinet. This is more of a high end, high gloss finish, that's just not something that we see typically. Again, not normal, but I don't know that walking in, right? I don't understand exactly what someone's finish level is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I think a lot of times too, we go on a first meeting with a client and they kind of get in this mode of like, oh, I have to tell you everything that I want to do right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to like slow them down, get them to take a step back, right? And
Yeah.
say, I don't need you to explain to me everything in your brain right this moment. We're going to get to that,
Well,
right?
that's actually a really good point because this goes along with, so we just came from a
Right.
consult, okay? We came from a consult about 2 minutes away from our office, so this was just an interesting day. It's been a busy day, but especially packing in this episode as well. But we came from this meeting, and they did just that.
Right.
They actually tried to take us through every single space, tell us all the different ideas, and I think that comes from a place of this three bid rule,
Right.
right? Where they think that they need to tell us everything so that we get all the information and then we can now
Yeah.
produce
Like we
some
just
sort of
have a
output.
calculator.
Yeah, the magic calculator again. I'm going to probably say that in every episode.
Yeah.
I'm just
The
going to let you know.
magic calculator. Maybe we need a graphic for the magic
We
calculator.
might. But I think I say it so much, though, because I think that homeowners frequently think that we have some sort of magic calculator. And sometimes contractors have some sort of magic calculator. They really do, right? It's some, we call it voodoo estimating. And again, that's probably for another time, but it really is truly what they're doing. They're just, we say, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
So one of the key points here is, apples to apples. We always hear apples to apples quotes. And at this point, while somebody has a dream, an idea, there's no way for a contractor to put real numbers on that, right? They can't produce a real proposal, and it is just an estimate. I want people to really understand that is that there's a huge difference between an estimate and a proposal.
Yes.
An estimate is just that. An estimate is a guess. A proposal is where somebody actually takes some tangible evidence and puts it together. They take all of the things, all of the variables, and they put those together and they create a price based on real things, right? Usually real materials. In a lot of scenarios, I think unfortunately, it's still a little bit loose. We still have a lot of budgets, allowances, things like that. But the idea is that an estimate is just that. And getting 3 estimates, especially 3 free ones, you should expect that those numbers are going to be all over the place because again, it's just an interpretation of what that person thinks that you want. It's an interpretation of the finish level. It's an interpretation of all those things, all the variables that we need to figure out. And I think, pre-construction for us on average, I would say takes about somewhere between 60 to 120 days, right? Or maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 months. 2 to 4 months of talking back and forth, working with a client, coming up with some drawings, doing different things, right? Going back and forth, trying to tweak the layout, massaging the layout, maybe adding things that they really want, maybe that they didn't express in that first meeting or they forgot about, right? These are things that happen too in that first meeting. Or they're just, there's a lot that comes in,
Yeah.
right? That we really need to soak in before we can start to produce something real.
Well, and I have a good example of something that one of our past clients, they had a true engineered hardwood floor existing in their home. We were going to take that out and replace it. They wanted to use an LVP product, so luxury vinyl plank for everybody who probably doesn't know the acronyms. And when we were working on our proposal for this and, vetting the product for their home, we discovered that the LVP was not as thick as their current existing hardwood floor.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, cool. Nobody probably even realizes what the problem is there. So if we took out their hardwood floor
Mm-hmm.
and we put in the new LVP, and the LVP is not as tall as the hardwood, you're going to be left with
A gap underneath your casings.
your casing, or you're going to have to modify your casing or replace your casing. So in a typical scenario, I feel like the contractor is probably just going to install the new floor, and then the homeowner might walk in and be like, why is there a gap between my door casing and my floor?
I would say most of our clients would see that and they would care.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then what do you do at that point? So now the floor is installed.
Well, let me ask a question.
Sure.
I think that's a really good point, and it goes to show these are one of the bazillion things that can be solved in using a pre-construction process. In this scenario that we're talking about, where somebody in a typical scenario, this contractor removed the flooring that was 3/4 of an inch thick, and now they're putting in a new floor that's 3/8 of an inch thick. For those of you not good with fractions, that would be half of the thickness. Now there's a gap underneath either your door jambs and or your door casings. So there's a 3/8 of an inch gap. And again, for easy numbers, it's pretty close to a half an inch, okay? Most people, I don't know who would be okay with this. Most people are not going to be okay with this, right? So, but in this scenario where you had a written scope of work maybe and you had a contract to change out the floors, who's likely to pay for that repair?
Well, the client is absolutely likely to pay for the repair, but this really muddies the water as to who pays for that repair, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And the client's perspective is, well, you didn't tell me that's what it was going to look like. I didn't know that, right? You didn't tell me this was going to happen. So even if they do pay for it, they're mad or frustrated,
of course,
because they didn't know this was going to happen, and now here's an expense that they weren't expecting.
Right.
If they want it done right, then they're going to spend more money.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, if the contractor wasn't aware of that and now he has to go fix all their door casings also, what does that do to his schedule?
Yeah.
When does that work come in? Oh, my painters were supposed to be here tomorrow, but now I've got to repair all the door casings and,
a bigger part of the problem, right? Just goes to show, just because they took that floor out, they put that floor in, it could be very well specified in the contract that there wasn't any other work to be done, right? And so while you would hope that the contractor would have led you again in the right direction, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be responsible to pay for all those, to either lower the doors or to change the door casings, etc. So that's why, again, that's another part of this process or the pre-construction process that makes this so important, because finding all these details and solving all of these problems in pre-construction is really critical to knowing what the cost of your project is prior to starting the project.
Right. And the homeowner, in our scenario, our homeowner was able to make an educated decision on which way they wanted to go.
Yeah.
Did they want us to patch the door casings? Did they want to replace the door casings? Or maybe this made them go, oh, well, you know what? I actually don't like my doors at all. I want new doors in my house. And we haven't even started construction. So now we have time to pivot and plan and have that discussion, look into those costs, and let them decide, how they want to move forward with that.
Yeah. So again, three bids or three estimates, right? You're not comparing apples to apples. You don't know what the materials are. You don't know what the timelines are. There's really nothing. There's not enough information when you're dreaming in order for them to give you real numbers. So just expect that those numbers are going to be all over the place. What we say, and I don't want to go too sideways here. I want to finish this point, but what we always tell our clients is you really should be thinking about and put this in your mind is competitive interview versus competitive bidding,
Yeah.
right? So find the right contractor. It doesn't have to be me. There are other people out here that do this, but find somebody who has this process or has some sort of a process like this and really do that interview and call some of their, call some of their references and make sure that they did deliver on that promise too, right? Did they do what they said that they were going to do? So I think kind of buttoning this up, on the flip side, right? Sometimes people take that low number and they just assume that that's going to be what it is. It usually isn't, right? But at the very least, even if they do, that low bid comes in and are able to complete it mostly for that price, they're going to probably cut corners somewhere. These costs are what they are, right? There's no real way around them. The cost to pay somebody an appropriate wage and all of the materials, and you just kind of bundle all those things together, they just cost what they cost, right? So I think sometimes people think that again we have some sort of a structure that where maybe you pay more in this area or this neighborhood, and that's just not the way that this goes.
Yeah.
So the low bid generally means that they are probably going to cut corners somewhere. Can you summarize or define? Because I know I couldn't in the last episode. I went sideways 10 times.
Yeah.
Can you summarize for me what pre-construction actually is?
Well, how much time do we have?
All the time that you need.
Would you like a step-by-step approach?
Why don't you give me a high level? Give me a 30,000 feet view, and then we can kind of look into breaking this down a little bit.
Okay, so high level view. Pre-construction is getting your clients' ideas for their project kind of written down on paper, if you will, providing them with some form of a draft floor plan or some sort of schematic as to what we're building. It's investigating and selecting all of the materials that we're going to use in the project. And then it's creating construction drawings. And then it's doing the proposal work of, maybe having subcontractors do a site visit, pre-qualifying all of their proposals and getting all of your costs in line in order for you to present a construction schedule, a written scope of work, and a proposal to a client for their big dream.
At what stage should a construction contract be signed
Well, in our process, it's at the end
of this pre-construction process? So I think this is another place where I think we may be a little bit different, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that this is the only way or the right way. But I do believe that it's the right way, and that's why we do it this way. I think we both agree that this is the right way. When we do pre-construction for somebody, we always tell them, we're trying to earn their business through this process. And if at some point or any point they want to back out of the deal, we let them out. That's fine. Just you pay for wherever we're at, the plans, etc. But I don't want to twist anyone's arm to get them to the end if they don't feel like it's going the right way.
Yeah, well, and to be honest, we also want to see how they work with us, right? Life is too short to work with people who are unpleasant or unkind, and
right.
Unfortunately, those people do exist. We don't run into them very often, but it is nice to work together. We always use the analogy we like to date before we get married, to get to know someone, because at the end of the day, when we go into construction contract with someone, we're taking on a huge amount of risk. Our livelihood, our business, our family's livelihood, all of that's really, I don't want to say it's at stake, but it's what we put on the line to run our company. And if there is any type of a feeling that that's going to be, not going to go well, then I think, getting to know our clients before we go there with them is nice for us too.
Yeah, I think you scratched the surface of this a little bit, but I think it's about communication.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that our client or our potential client is that we communicate well with each other, right? Because I always say this in our meetings. It's like, from the client's perspective, if we go through this process, this pre-construction process, and let's say we spend 2 to 4 months together and they spend X amount of dollars, let's just say they spend five or 8,000, $10,000, whatever that cost may be, then we want to make sure that we communicate well. Because if we don't, let's just say that process was pretty rocky, like through that front end, or we were arguing a lot, we probably don't want to get into construction together, right?
Yeah.
This is just perfect for the analogy of dating before you get married. Because if you're dating somebody and it is not going well, like you don't get married, you don't move in with each other, right?
Mhm.
Like you just cut it off, you break up and you go your separate ways. It really is kind of no different here. And I don't want to suggest to people that we're just, looking for people to break up with because that's never the case, right? We're always trying to make sure that we've kind of done some basic pre-qualification and we think it's going to be a good fit. We don't just sign any pre-construction contract
Right.
either. We've actually explicitly told people, there's one that's on the docket right now, that we have explicitly told them that they want to sign with us. And actually, they've already signed the pre-construction agreement, but we haven't taken a dollar from them, and we haven't started because we've told them actually, and it has nothing to do with communication. It actually has everything to do with budget. Unfortunately, we don't believe that their budget is very realistic
For what they want to
for
do.
what they want to do, and we believe that we will underdeliver,
Yeah.
right? And so the idea or the concept here is that first and foremost, let's talk, right? I want to know a little bit about you, right? I want to know if I think that we're going to be a decent communicator, right? We're going to be communicating well with each other. Secondarily, you should be on the same page, right? Like again, I don't want to drag you through this process if it's going to be rocky, but I want to make sure too that we think that we can get you to the finish line because the last thing I want to do again is drag somebody through this and have them spend a bunch of money and then just be disappointed on
Right.
the backside.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the things we do in pre-construction,
Sure.
like the actual tangible things we do.
Yeah.
So first thing we do is we go out and we have what we call an initial consult with a client. So this is where they're really interviewing us and we're explaining our process to them and how it works and how their project might fit into our process, right?
Right.
So let's say that goes well. The client says, I really like your process, Rusty. What's my next step?
So next step is going to be setting up a measure and what we call a measure and scan appointment. So used to be all tape measures, and then we kind
Paper
of
and pencil.
graduate. Yeah, we used to graduate, or we graduated to the laser tape measure a few years ago, and now the technology has taken us pretty far in the last few years with the lidar scanners.
It's
So
amazing.
yeah, so now we bring in a series of lidar scanners, and we'll actually do modeling of the existing building, and it's all done a little bit more accurately. And I like to point out to people because sometimes people think, "Oh, that's fancy equipment. It's expensive." That's probably why this process costs so much. And to be honest, it was expensive equipment. Some of it was. Some of it can be done with an iPad or an iPhone. So I don't want to suggest that like this is super proprietary equipment. But I mean, we've got one camera that's like a $3,500 camera, right? The idea is that not only is it more efficient, like over time this stuff pays for itself, especially for us, and it becomes a very low cost way to measure because it's very efficient. But the one thing that I think the biggest piece of tech that's came out of that for us, or the biggest improvement in that tech, has been the ability to measure ceilings, because we rarely, unless we really needed that dimension, right? Like, or those dimensions on the ceilings, vaulted ceilings, beams that were on ceilings, especially if they were up high. I mean, those weren't easy to measure. We would just take some pictures and they would be mostly represented on the plans, but they would probably be in some fairly random location. Well, now with these LiDAR scanners, we can measure and get all of that information, right? We can get lighting, we can get the exact, location of lighting, exact location of the air registers, smoke detectors. So we're coming in and we're measuring everything so that we can effectively create the model or the existing as-built set of plans for their home.
Yeah. Yeah. So from there, we take our scans and we create what we call our existing floor plan. So that's how we look at your home from a top-down view to see, what we're working with. And from there, we start our first sort of run at what we call a proposed floor plan. So based on, what the client's wishes are, we're looking at that for, usually we're taking out some walls or we're rearranging things or massaging layout for things. So we kind of do our first run at that. And usually before we really get going, or before I usually get going on that, I like to sit down with you so that, it's really easy in my program for me to just, select a wall and just delete it, right?
Right.
We don't want that wall there.
Or move the toilet over 2
Or move the
inches.
toilet over, center a window. I just wish life were as easy as it is in my computer program. But I like to sit down with you so that I can say, here's sort of my first vision. I'd like to get rid of this or move this or shift that. Do you see any problems with that? Or are we going to have any challenges structurally or based on the client's budget or, all of the factors that we know at this point? Is that an attainable or the right move for us? So we kind of do this like pre-run on the proposed drawing.
Yeah.
And then from there, with that information in mind, I make a rough draft floor plan for the clients. It's a pretty low-level detail plan at that stage because what we want to do from there is have you and Jordan take a look at it once I'm sort of done with it and take a look at costs, sort of do a first pass on budget ranges for this project.
Yeah. So this is a little bit unique in our office because we are actually like you being the designer,
Mm-hmm.
me being the builder. And obviously we don't do everything. We've got, employees and people who take a lot of this load from us as well. But what's unique about at least us is that we are having these communications to make sure that there is, especially if there has been some budget conversation up to this point, which hopefully there has been, that we are trying to model and design around the budget constraints of the client. So, and sometimes a client is like, hey, let's design the dream first. And then if we need to scale back, let's scale back. And sometimes people say, this is my budget. And if we have that number, that's fine. We just know now what we have to work with, and we need to try to design within that budget, right? So I think where this can get confusing with other people or other relationships is if you have, if you go hire a designer and then you go hire a contractor, that could be a difficult thing. And I want to be clear here. We work actually with other designers. We work with other architects, but we're pretty selective about who we work with if and when we do work with these people. And it's because we do this exact same thing, right? So we've worked with another really high-end designer here in Sacramento. And for example, when we work with them, we're very close with them and their client, our client, right? We're working together for the client. And we're making sure that we all understand what that budget is and making sure that we're doing the right thing for the client, right? We're making sure that we're being mindful of the budget.
Yeah. So once you guys have looked at my proposed plan and you put together a nice presentation, just a single sheet of paper with the floor plan with some budget ranges, we have kind of a very brief general scope of work lined out. And then we have a meeting with the client, usually a Zoom meeting, where we're showing them the floor plan and we're starting to discuss where those budget ranges are coming in. So it's always a kind of, I don't want to call it a scary meeting, but it's a meeting where we start to really decide which direction this project is going.
Yeah.
Whether the client was completely off base with what they thought they were going to spend on the project, or if there are things we need to eliminate Sometimes there's things we end up adding at this stage
Right.
too. So it's really where we're starting to decide how much of this we're moving forward with and we're going to fine tune and work on all the details for. So we present that to them and then we let them go, sleep on it if they don't have immediate feedback for us. And then we ask them to take some time and let us know their feedback, either on the floor plan, the design, the layout, if there's changes or different ideas there, and then also on the budget ranges that
Right.
we've provided.
So in the office here, we kind of call that our budget puzzle,
Yeah.
and it's just I think this I don't know how we coined this term, to be honest.
I do know how.
Oh, do you?
It started out when we had a project where there was multiple rooms and we kind of broke it up. We do this pretty frequently because, scope creep is real.
Yeah.
But a client will have, I want to do my primary bathroom and my hall bathroom and my kitchen and my flooring everywhere. And, the wish list is always higher than the budget,
Right.
always. And so we started breaking it up for people into pieces, right? And our idea there was that you can now, if you can't or don't want to pay for all of it now, at least you're armed with the education to know what things are going to cost and which pieces you want to focus on or prioritize on. So it's a puzzle.
Right. So in this exact example, we'll have potentially somebody comes to us and says they want a kitchen, they want to do all their bathrooms, and they say, but that's it.
Yeah. That's it.
And so
Just my whole house.
yeah, and so usually we say so like a whole house remodel. And they
Yeah.
go, no, just the kitchens and the bathrooms. And so then a lot of times we say, well, you do realize the rest of the house is probably just flooring and paint, right?
Yeah.
Or for the most part, right? I'm oversimplifying this. But it's pretty tough to live without bathrooms or a kitchen. Sometimes people don't even logistically start to think through these things, right? This is all again part of the pre-construction process is are you going to need to move out?
Yeah.
Right? Is this part of the consideration or part of the financial consideration? Do you need to rent an Airbnb or,
Mm-hmm.
stay at mom and dad's house or stay somewhere, right? A friend's house? This may not be super realistic for a lot of people. Some people are like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to stay somewhere for 3-4 months. We got the kids and they're in school or
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense, right? So, and that's okay. But again, these are considerations like we have to present to the client.
Yeah.
It's like if you truly want to do all 3 bathrooms and, we're going to have your house completely upside down, it's probably a good idea that we consider some other living arrangements, right? Because it's not super realistic to think like you're going to pile into the remaining 2 bedrooms that don't have any scope in them and you're going to live there. It's just not very
We
reasonable.
had some clients do that, and then COVID hit.
Oh, that's true.
That was a rough one. The project was great, but
Yeah. I mean, it does happen. And I think there have been some people who've gotten super creative and, they've turned their garage into
camping ground.
a mini kitchen and,
Mhm.
and a family room that's got their TV and everything. It's not very typical. And we don't force people to move out, but we definitely tell them when it's, not going to be a good idea.
Yeah.
But I think also sometimes people are maybe even considering that like phasing is something that is efficient or cost effective.
Yeah.
Well, that may be for you, but it's probably not for us. Like for me to mobilize the demo guy twice to come back to do that last bathroom is probably going to cost me a little bit more money.
Yeah.
To have all of those trades come back 2, 3, 4 times, it's not the most efficient way to do a project. So again, while I'm not suggesting we do it all, that's part of that budget puzzle discussion is maybe we do leave, if you are planning to stay in the house, maybe we don't touch this side of the house at all.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a way to kind of configure it or kind of quarantine one area of the house so that there's no scope? Or maybe there's very light scope or limited scope into those areas so that you can live there. But again, part of the process and what we need to work through.
Yeah. So then once we receive feedback on budget and floor plan and we're ready to move forward, that's when kind of the fun part starts for me. I get to go put together materials. So, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, flooring, tile, paint, all of the things that everybody dreams about and thinks about. So I usually compile those into a lovely presentation. I get samples of things that I can, um, pictures of things online that I can't get samples for, and then we have our design meeting where we sit down and we touch and we feel all of these things. We look at a lot of pictures and talk about the pros and cons. This meeting is usually, sometimes 2-3 hours. Any longer than 2.5 hours, it just people get tired. You get
Yeah.
decision fatigue, but we usually make really great progress at that meeting where they're telling me oh yes, I like that, I don't like that, and we're really narrowing down materials or maybe areas on materials where we need to focus a little bit more on. So
Yeah.
then I'm able to either go grab more samples for them to show them, additional things, or I can send them out to a particular showroom to look at maybe one facet of the project and they're not just completely overwhelmed by all the choices that they have to make. So it's been a really, really effective way. I've had a lot of clients that just tell me, I just need you to show me 3 choices and then I'll pick what I like from the
Yeah.
3. That's a really common one that I think I get. Um, you know, then I get my creative types that just want to see, all kinds of things and just, they like too many things and so it's really hard to decide. I'm actually a lot like that. But it's a really fun part of the process. So we do that, and all those choices are made, and I compile those into lots of documentation on my plan pages. We call it our spec sheet, where we're listing model numbers, colors, products, all of that. And then I'm preparing other illustrations of how tile is to be installed, where toilet paper holders are going to be mounted, towel hooks where those are mounted, and I finish up that part of our plans where really a lot of those details come in.
Yeah. So
Um,
up to this point,
yeah.
we've met.
Yep.
We've had our first meeting. So
Yep.
actually going just one step back,
Yeah. Sure.
we've had our phone conversation, usually some initial phone call,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've now decided to meet at the house,
Mm-hmm.
usually. And then that next appointment is
Measure.
measuring, right? And then we're getting started. There's a lot of things going on, but
In the background.
simplifying this, now we're starting on kind of the design portion where we're starting to define materials and specify materials and selections, work with the client on those.
Laying out
Right,
cabinetry.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then from there, where do we go?
Yeah. From there, once we've really made our decisions on that, I like to, you know, somewhat call them our final decisions. We'll actually have you sign off on your what we call the design pages of the plans. That doesn't mean everything's set in stone and nothing can change, but it means we're working on this plan as we're going to the next step in the
Right.
process. And that's pretty critical because I'm going to hand this over to you and Jordan now to start looking at pricing this, right? We're getting to the real nuts and bolts of the real proposal, not the estimate anymore, but the real proposal. So usually the first step from there is Jordan schedules a site visit. And based on the criteria of the project, he's inviting any of our subcontractors that have a big role in this project. So we usually bring them donuts and invite them to the client's house and do a walk and talk about the scope, talk about what we're building, and that maybe you can touch on a little bit of how critical this is to our process.
Yeah, I may have touched on this a little bit in episode 1, but the fact that the reason that we do this, and this isn't super unique either. I think a lot of contractors, especially good ones, will have a meeting at the house with any of the critical players in this game. And it may not be every single subcontractor, but it's probably, again, one of the ones that we call kind of the heavy hitters, right? Because I think I did talk about this a little bit in episode 1, but the number one thing that we see in subcontractor qualification or misqualification in their bids is that the designer or the architect or whoever is creating the plan pages does that. And those people are usually not, including myself, are not always proficient in all the different trades, right? The sub trades. So while they all have probably some basic understanding and some of them more than others, they're still not professionals. An architect is not an electrician, right? And vice versa. And while an architect, I'm not diminishing what their capabilities are. And again, some are, much more in tune with these types of things than others. The electrician needs to see what is on the job, because if he doesn't, when he provides us a bid or his proposal and it's based on the plans, if the plans are not accurate or missing information, what does that mean for day one of electrical work?
It means a change order is
It
what it
means a
means.
change order. And generally speaking, even if you have a fixed bid contract, there's probably some hole that contractor might be able to use to, get the client to have to pony up that extra, cost, which is not good. Again, nobody likes these types of monetary surprises, and it's usually because it's just it's just lack of planning, right? Lack of really understanding what those existing systems were. So for us, it's really important. I know, again, we always pick on the electrician. Sorry, Anthony. And so, we want to get the big critical players over there, and that could be the flooring guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? It could be the drywall guy. It could be all of them. It could be the concrete, framing, roofing, windows, you name it. If they are a
Painter.
critical player, painter, if they're a critical player in the process, or they're probably a big driver of cost, we probably, or we know that their scope is going to be complex enough that they need to come see it themselves, or maybe the house is on a hill and there's 400 steps to the front door. I'm really sorry, but they're probably going to charge a little bit extra if they have to walk 400 steps back and forth to haul their equipment and all this
Yeah.
stuff. Like, you can't assume that that's not going
A
to be
factor.
a factor or consideration, right? So, again, we want to get those players out there though, so that when they, again, the electrician's going to go look at the panel. He's going to see, now he has a set of plans. He's going to say, cool, the panel is adequate to run these circuits. I can see how I'm going to run them now. Or, hey guys, did you think about this? Our panel's full. I have no way to get any extra circuits in here unless we do a sub panel. Okay. Well, I'd rather know that now, and so would the homeowner, than to find that out on day one of electrical work, right? That they now got a $5,000 or $10,000 change order. So this is a super critical step that a lot of contractors skip,
Mhm.
and it makes for poor qualification, or yeah, qualification of their subcontractor bids.
Yeah. So once we've had our site visit, then our subcontractors are able to prepare their proposals for us, and then we're able to qualify them and incorporate all of their scopes into basically our master written scope of work that we prepare for our clients.
Right.
And once we have those two steps done, then we can start to build a construction schedule based on our scope. So we can start putting pen to paper on, what exactly does this look like? What's a potential start date? When are we going to, project that we're going to get permits? When we'll be doing A, B, C, D all the way through?
Well, and that's also part of qualifying contractor proposals, which
Yeah.
I don't know that a lot of homeowners actually truly maybe understand what goes into that.
Yeah.
Because even after doing this myself, even for 20 something years and beyond that with other builders, qualifying a subcontractor bid can be really, really tough. And just like it's confusing, when a homeowner looks at probably our contract and says, gosh, what, are we missing anything in here? Right? That's them. They're really putting a lot of faith and trusting that that we've qualified all of this and that there's no
Right.
holes, right? There's nothing that's missing. And so, on that note, though, we have to do the same thing. We have to, in order for us to produce really quality output in terms of a written scope of work and a proposal that has all of these details in it and has qualified subcontractor bids, we have to qualify those bids. And what that means is, does the cost look adequate, right? That's just high level, 30,000 feet again. So does it look like it fits kind of the budget? We know this because we see lots of these different projects. We kind of have a basic understanding, or we probably have an idea of what the range might be. But and if it's not, if it's high, then we're probably calling them, right? And we're saying, "Hey, can you let us know why it was a little bit high, or maybe we think it's low?" And it's important too, because especially doing
What they
what we're
forget.
doing, yeah, did they miss something, right? We need to make sure. And that doesn't mean that we go back to people sometimes and say, "Hey, I do want to make sure that this is including everything. It did actually seem a little bit lower." And our subcontractors, we've worked with them for years. They're super honest. Like, we only work with really good, high quality people. So they're going to be honest with us. They're going to tell us, like, yeah, actually, it's not that difficult. We've just got to run this thing over here. And we go, okay, cool. Well, we were actually thinking it might be a little bit more difficult to access this area, or maybe we just assumed that we were going to run wiring a different way or ducting a different way, and they found a better way to do it. So we're first looking, hey, what's the pricing look like? Does it look like it's in line with what we were thinking it was going to be? If it does, let's look at what their pricing includes. So we're going through all of the items and making sure that it's inclusive of all of the things that we're putting in our written scope of work, right? But we're also qualifying the amount of time. So we're
Yeah.
asking them, how much time is this going to take you? And sometimes we're estimating that time when we're kind of pre-building our schedule,
Right.
but we'll say, hey, we assumed that this was going to take 3 days. I just want to make sure that that's good. That's when they come back just to say, oh, no, 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 this is going to take 6 days.
And here's why.
Yeah. Why is it going to take 6 days? So that's all part of the qualification process too, because how can I build a schedule if I have no idea? And then on the flip side, though, we're asking them to commit to
Right.
those times and those dates, right? So it's all, again, very important. And we're talking about on time and on budget.
Yep.
This is where contractors go sideways a little bit. They don't get all of this information, and it's impossible to create a project that is on time
Yeah.
and on budget if you
Yeah.
don't have this information.
Yeah. I wish sometimes our clients could see, be a fly on the wall when you and Jordan are working on one of these, and all the phone calls and the back and forth and all the conversations between the two of you, working through all of these things, making sure, it's just there's so much to it.
There really
And
is.
it's hard to quantify and explain to people, I think clients have a tendency to just oversimplify our jobs sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it just, maybe we need a reality TV day in here.
Yeah, just
I'm
put
sure it'd
cameras in
be
all the rooms.
boring and nobody would want to watch that. But anyway, so once those are all qualified, then you guys can start putting your proposal together,
Right.
building your spreadsheet and working towards that final number. So that's a pretty exciting part of the process, because that's really when everything starts to come together and kind of wrap up. And when you guys have your proposal done, we call them in for really kind of a final meeting, so to
Right.
speak, where you have the binder all built. So we've taken all the documentation that we've prepared, we print it on really nice thick paper, put it in our leather binder, and usually have some treats here on hand to hopefully, celebrate the fact that we're kind of closing up this process. But you take the time, usually about an hour or so, to flip through the binder and, revisit all the details, make sure there's not any tweaks or changes, immediately offhand that we know that we need to change. But just kind of reviewing the whole process and what we've done, and then showing them the number. And the whole goal here is, when you flip to that last page in the binder, is that they are not surprised when they see that number, right?
Right. So
'Cause-
we talked about the budget puzzle.
Right.
So this makes full circle. We're
Mhm.
talking about the budget puzzle, very beginning, right? We're usually doing that within the first probably 3 to 4 weeks of pre-construction. We're doing that budget puzzle. We're walking through, we call it kind of budgetary guidance also. We're trying to make sure that we're all on the same page before we start moving forward into these like more critical design phases, right? We want to make sure that the layout, the budgets, it's all working, right?
Yeah.
Or we think it's going to work. And so that way, again, when we get to the end, our commitment at that point, once we've gotten there, is to deliver something that
Yeah.
falls within that range,
Yeah.
right? And I think we talk about this all the time, but this is where projects die.
Yeah.
Generally, projects tend to die when a contractor spends a little bit of time, puts together some numbers, presents the numbers, and the numbers are higher than what the homeowner was expecting. They just say, well, it's just more than I wanted to.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a process, maybe and they haven't explained it to the client, or maybe they do and they just haven't explained it. They don't get an opportunity to go back and forth and try to figure out, where the scope and the budget align. We
Yeah.
always talk about that. It's like a
Yeah.
scale, right? You've got, if you think of the scale, you've got the scope on one side and the budget's on the other side. At some point, they have to balance themselves out. So if you don't have a process for that, then you just throw them a number and they don't like it, then they just walk away
Yeah.
because they don't understand like what to do. They just go to the next
Yeah.
person. They just say, well, that's what his price is, and that's more than I want
Yeah.
to pay or more than I can afford. So I just need to call somebody else
Yeah.
now, right? This is the cyclical kind of banging your head against the wall with contractors that a lot of clients do. It's really, again, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, you're leaving them feeling frustrated. Our whole goal in this, our mission statement, if you will, is all about client experience, right? This can be a very frustrating process for people, and I think we've worked really hard for the last 10 years to identify these pain points for clients and trying to help them get out of their own way.
Yeah.
And to go through this with us, I don't know how other designers do this, but I know how easy my job would be if I just took notes meeting with a client and designed them everything they dream of. I could put together the most amazing, beautiful design for you based on all the dreams and all the Pinterest pages and pins that you have sent me, right? But at the end of the day, are you going to pay for that? Does your budget afford that? Or can I help you in a different way maximize your dollars and check most of the boxes and help you enjoy this experience and be really happy with your outcome because you had someone that was looking out for your best interest? And so that's maybe a little bit of like the why of what we do behind this process. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not about just maximizing every dollar out of someone's wallet. It's about taking them through this and really, hoping that they enjoy it.
Right. So being that our number one,
Yeah.
thing is client experience, client journey. We talk about that a lot in the office. What does the client experience feel like? What do you think it is that most other contractors really say that they're hanging their business on, they're hanging their hat on?
Quality, baby.
Quality, right. And what's crazy to me is that, there are a lot of contractors who provide a phenomenal product. They do great work. They provide quality in their product, right? But they're not providing a client experience.
Right.
I want to make sure that that's if it's not if somebody who's listening to this podcast is, looking to figure out who they're going to hire, maybe they're not logistically or geographically like in our area. This is something I want people to really focus on because I think it's very important. If somebody's got a good reputation online or you've got a good referral from a neighbor or whatever, or you've seen their work, you they should have good quality, right?
Right.
Like I think people think that should be, that's like you got to find somebody that does good
Does he do good
quality.
work?
Like yeah, he's got to be the best at what he does. And I agree with you. I would want somebody that does good quality too. I mean, when we buy things, we want good quality things, right? As consumers. But you got to remember that that's the foundation. That should be the bottom line, right? That should be what they're delivering to you at a minimum,
Right.
right? And I think a lot of times people think that's the top,
Right.
right? Like I want the difference in contractors are quality. It's going to be low quality, maybe mid-range or high quality. There are plenty of high quality guys out there. Plenty. Again, a lot of them still who don't have a good pre-construction process. So because of that, you still get a headache on the backside. So I would really implore people to think about how important the client experience is to them and weigh that against what they're providing you
Yeah.
too, right? Because there are very few people, I think, out there who really kind of hang their hat on their business being about the client journey or the client experience or just your happiness through this
Yeah.
process or taking as much stress out of the process as I humanly possibly can.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that we're perfect and that this is stress free because that's not fair. It still is very stressful. But if I can do things, if I can solve as many problems as I can as possible in this pre-construction process so that I remove the problems from the during construction phase, then that's probably going to remove the surprises and probably the stress from the project.
So that's a perfect segue into this next question here. Maybe you can give us some examples of some red flags that people can look for when they're trying to hire a contractor.
Sure. I think the number one thing would probably be if you are generally kind of anxious to get a project started and your contractor is ready to get started, especially if it's like right away. I know we've walked into houses before where like they've actually started demoing themselves and we're like, this is probably not going to go well.
Yeah.
Um, that's probably my number one red flag. Like, why, for one, why are they ready right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's probably two potential, more than likely realistic answers for that. One is they're not busy, and why are they not busy?
Yeah.
That should be a red flag. And two, this is more common, I think, in the contracting world, is that they just want to get you as quick as possible to contract. And that way, once they've got you signed,
Figure the rest out later.
yeah, we can solve problems
Yeah.
later. Like we can figure out pricing, we can do all kinds of stuff
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Another one would probably be, if they're giving you just verbal estimates or even, 2-page estimates,
Yeah,
something that's not a little bit more in depth or descriptive, or a contract that's not actually fairly lengthy because we're required by the license board to actually have particular things in our
right.
contract.
Which is more than 2 pages.
Right, right. And so I would say just, not only like a verbal estimate or a handshake kind of deal, but just lack of documentation and paperwork in general, because there's a lot that the law requires of us here in California.
Yeah,
And, it's even taken us a long time to get that really, perfected, I would say.
true.
And so a lack of documentation in general would
Yeah.
be a red flag.
And that's not going to be easy for someone to really be able to decipher, right? And each state is going to be different in what they require. California is generally pretty, restrictive in terms of what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
And like you said or suggested, there are multiple pages of information that we have to provide to the client by law.
Yeah.
It has to be in our contract.
Lien law.
Yeah,
The right to cancel.
right. There's a lot of things, and I think if people want to know these things, I mean, please reach out and ask us. Like, we'd love
Give
to
you the
comment. Yeah.
masterclass on
Yes.
it.
Well, especially if you are in California, I can't speak to contracts outside of the state of California. I am only licensed in California, so I think that's it's just a big one to keep in mind that there is a lot of contract language that needs to be there. There's a lot of very specific things, and 2 pages is probably not enough.
Well, and I think this goes back to being impatient or being excited, right? It's not necessarily even impatience as it is excitement. Like people, I mean, how many times every year do we get a call in like August and someone has a project that they want done before Thanksgiving?
Every year.
Every year,
Yeah.
right? Every year. And we're like, you should have called us in February.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, being impatient sometimes leads to overlooking some details that really should be there. So, another one would be asking for large sums of money or really many sums of money before work is done or completed. So
Yeah.
there are, we don't need to get into the weeds of this, but there are laws that we have to follow about progress payments and bills and, um, you know, just look into that before you write some large checks and know that some progress has been made on your job before you give large sums of money.
Right.
They really need to provide you with a progress payment schedule. That would be a red flag, is if it seems like they're asking for too much money for the work that's been done.
Well, that in general, and I think more even just going back to the very beginning is just asking for some substantial amount of money for a deposit because there are very specific deposit rules in the state of California as dictated by the license
Yeah.
board. And we know a lot of contractors who've been in trouble for this, in the past,
Yeah.
right? Because they're asking for, they're saying, okay, well, we can't get started until you pay me $50,000
Yeah.
or $100,000. And the reality is that they can't do that,
Yeah.
right? And so um, look into this. The bottom line is that actually a contractor, even on a multi-million-dollar project, which people don't usually know this, is they can only charge you $1,000
Yeah,
for a
for
deposit,
deposit.
which is really scary, right? Because it becomes kind of the bank of
Believe me, it's
the
heavily weighted for the
contractor. It
consumer.
it very much is,
Yeah.
but and the contractor's usually going to take that deposit super early on, so then they're going to be doing work and providing some things, and then they'll be billing along the
Yeah.
way. But yeah, definitely, if somebody asks you for more than $1,000 immediately upon signing of the contract, that should be a massive red flag because that is just downright illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. So we covered all the bad things. What about the green flags? What are good things that people can look for in a contractor?
Yeah, I just think that number one would just be, do they have some sort of a process? I think there's no other right way to do a project without a pre-construction process.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. But if you're not going through that process, or maybe you've got a project that doesn't necessarily require this full process, maybe it's not a big remodel or something like that. Maybe it's a much smaller project. Find somebody for one that you communicate well with, and two, I think make sure that they're asking you a lot of questions, right? Like they should be asking questions to you about what you want,
Mm-hmm.
what you're expecting. They should just be
Yeah.
asking questions.
Yeah. I like this one too. They discuss potential challenges honestly.
Yeah.
I think that's a great one because, I mean, if you see something that is going to be challenging, or maybe even it's as simple as like a client is oversimplifying something that they want to do, right? Like, oh, we're just going to, take out this wall or open that up. And being able to explain that well to a client of why it's a challenge, it kind of boils down to communication, I guess, again here. But
Right.
someone that will say, like, hey, that's probably not as easy as you think, and here's why, or, something like that. So I liked that one.
Well, we get that a lot because we get a lot of people who want to move walls or they
Or
want to take them
vault their
out
ceiling.
or vault their ceiling.
Yeah, just there's room up there.
Yeah. Well, there's also variables that we need to look into to make sure that we can do that. And everything's doable. We always tell people it's all doable. It's just, how much are we going to spend
Everything's
to do it?
doable.
Yeah. I mean, and we can always take the roof off and put a new one on,
I mean, we
right?
can bulldoze the house and build a new one.
Well, that's true too. But like I was just saying, actually, I just was half joking. I said we can take the roof off and put a new one on, but we actually did that.
Yeah.
Remember? So that, project over in Carmichael that we just finished a few months back, they really wanted a vaulted ceiling and their roof structure just
Didn't
didn't
allow it.
really allow for it. And so we did talk to them about removing the entire roof on basically a third of the home. Actually,
Yeah.
it was a little bit more than a third of the home, and just putting basically new trusses on that section of the house so that they could get that vault. And to them, that sounded really silly because they're like, well, wait a second. Like, we could just take the roof, the underside, or take the ceiling and just move it up. And that's got to be cheaper. And once we started to work through that, it actually wasn't.
Yeah.
And so while that's maybe not going to be the same for every project. In this particular project, we actually did do the engineering to modify their existing ceiling structure. They had some roof that needed to be changed as well because it was going from a hip to a gable. So the style or the structure of the roof itself was changing, but it was actually cheaper
Yeah.
in the long run to remove their
The roof.
roof and put a new one on,
Yep.
which again sounds crazy, but we do this stuff all the time. So that's again part of the pre-construction process that was working through
Yeah.
that and figuring
Exploring both
out.
of those options.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, key takeaways. Let me have you finish this sentence for me.
Okay.
If you remember nothing else from this podcast today, remember this.
I'm going to say prioritize client experience or your happiness over the quality. And I'm not suggesting that you give up any quality or you
Correct.
sacrifice any quality. But again, quality to me should be the baseline. It should be the foundation of what your contractor is providing to you or the team that you've hired is providing to you. You need to make sure that that experience is not going to take years of your life, right? Like that's what I would say to take away from this.
I like it. Okay. Well, that was fun and hopefully much shorter than the last one. So, if you guys liked this show or you found anything of value in it, we'd love to hear about it. Like it, comment, subscribe. I don't know, all the things you're supposed to do. You can always reach us through our website, give us a call, email us. We're here. We're easy to find.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for listening. As always, again, I'm Rusty with K Squared Construction and my lovely wife, Brenna, who is a designer. This is like the greater Sacramento area of California. We wanted to do this podcast to basically bring educational value to anybody who's listening. The processes that we talk about should be valuable for you really anywhere in the United States. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening.
yeah, I appreciate it. I also want to let our listeners know wherever you may be listening. If you caught this first episode on YouTube, for example, know that we are now on Apple Podcasts. We are also on Spotify and I think 2 or 3 others now. So pretty much anywhere that you are getting your podcasts to be able to download and listen to it, you should be able to find us. Just want to thank everybody again for listening. We really appreciate it. If you find that either you are in your own kind of journey trying to figure out, how to hire a contractor or how to find the right contractor or designer or team to build your project, please reach out to us. Please share this with somebody who also may be in that same journey as well. Or if you found value or interest in anything that we had to say, we really appreciate you sharing this with us because, again, this is really not for us. And we really want to help people be able to find the right people for their project. Thanks again.